I've been getting back into my Telecaster lately. It's nothing super fancy, this one, but I think it does a fine job at getting that classic Telecaster tone. I've used it for a lot of different sounds for the different bands I've been in over the years, so I thought I'd make this video showing some of my very favourite Telecaster sounds and how to get them. Let's start with the obvious one, classic country twang. I like to use the middle pickup position with this, just because with both pickups selected, you get that lovely, clean Fender mid-scooped sound. You could use the bridge pickup as well if you want a more sort of hard and aggressive tone, that'll work fine. Clean American amp, vintage style OTA type compression pedal, just because they have a nice fast attack, so they even out the dynamics from all that hybrid picking and chicken picking that goes with this style. And they roll off a little bit at the very high end as well, which is nice. For a jazz tone, definitely neck pickup, and I like to roll the volume control down just a little bit so it's not wide open. That way it kind of softens the dynamics and reduces just a little bit high end without losing clarity. If it's still too bright for you, obviously use the tone control as well for more of a dramatic change. Heavy strings are a really good idea. Ideally something like 12s, 11s will work well though, just because if you get a bit bluesy and start to dig in, they won't sound plinky or ring sharp like sometimes thinner strings can. Use a clean amp for this, or you can push the amp a little bit if you want to move into more of a jazz blues territory. Take your pick of reverbs. Spring reverb will sound bright and lively. Hall and room reverbs work well. I'm going to use a plate reverb, which is the same type of reverb that Rudy Van Gelder had in his studio for all those classic jazz recordings in the 50s and 60s. I'll play a jazz ballad that I think suits a sound with a lot of reverb. For a 50s rock and roll sound, use bridge pickup for a harder sound with more output to help push a clean amp into slight overdrive. Add a fast slapback tape delay, ideally a 16th note speed, not too many repeats, just one is fine and you're good to go. I remember when I got my Gibson Les Paul and then being absolutely horrified when I found out that Jimmy Page actually played a Telecaster for that iconic solo in Stairway to Heaven. It's such a great sound though. For the 60s rock sound, it's normally bridge pickup and it's all about pushing a vintage amp into a lot of overdrive. I think British amps work just as well as American amps for this. I'll use some amp in a box type pedals to try and highlight that subtle difference between those two flavours. about the openness to the sound of a Telecaster. It's not quite as thin and quacky as a Strat can be, but it's not quite as compressed and mid-focused as a Les Paul can be. It's somewhere in that sweet spot in the middle. And I think it makes a great choice of guitar for gentle, picked, arpeggiated chords that need to sound open and dynamic. I think it's fair to say the Telecaster had a bit of a lull of popularity in the 80s, but it came back with a vengeance with 90s and noughties indie and alternative rock. With distortion and fuzz, the pickups on a Telecaster can sound nice and edgy and kind of bright and abrasive sounding, especially compared to a humbucker on a Les Paul that can sound a little bit too smooth and clinical sometimes. For this sound, I think use plenty of drive and fuzz, and don't be afraid to get creative with your effects. I'll get into some tones that are good for punk now, but remember, if you're finding this video interesting, think about liking the video and maybe subscribing to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. So for that bright, aggressive punk rock tone that Wilco Johnson and Joe Strummer from The Clash got from their Telecasters, you want to almost remove any hint of smoothness to the sound. So that means bridge pickup, clean solid state amp, transistor distortion, and you almost want to attack the listener with that abrasive tone. Telecaster doesn't have the mid-scoop that a Strat blues player has, and it doesn't have the creaminess and sustain of a Les Paul humbucker either. When you're on a Telecaster, it's all about blues with an aggressive bite to the tone. Muddy Waters and Albert Collins, I think, are good examples of this sort of tone. Simple, natural tube amp breakup and letting the player's sound shine through is the name of the game here. Telecaster does a great job at funk. Prince is the obvious example of this, but they do crop up on other players as well. I've seen them used in the James Brown Band, and you can't get much of a better endorsement for funk than that. I like to use middle pickup position, a crystal clean amp, and just a little bit of compression just to smooth out any harsh transients. Feel free to add any effects like wah and phaser, envelope filters, or chorus. I'll do a little bit here with the Qtron envelope filter. Telecasters with humbuckers are great. You get many elements of the Gibson design with smoother high gain sounds mixed in with the longer scale length you associate with Fender guitars. There's something to be said about the kind of primitive body shape of the Telecaster as well compared to, say, Les Pauls or SGs as well. There's something nice and solid about the Telecaster, whereas the Les Paul and SG have more angles and there's more joints that are glued in, whereas the Telecaster is all bolted and feels a bit more solid. This is the only Telecaster I have with humbuckers. These are wide range humbuckers. A better example might be a Telecaster with PAF standard kind of Gibson style humbuckers, but this is what I have. Hopefully you get the idea. Now with humbuckers, you've got access to a lot of hard rock and metal sounds from your Telecaster.